Invariably, in the process of implementing Maximo, the question comes up, what is an asset? And the reason this comes up is because a lot of times industrial customers will have very expensive, large spare parts that go on larger assets, which are really a system of assets put together. And so this starts to get murky. So let's take a look at what's an asset from a Maximo perspective, and why is it an asset, and what are the lines in the sand, so to speak, that we should consider as we are setting this up. So top line, in Maximo, when we are looking at assets, we're typically looking at a use case of either operations or production. And more often than not, these are large physical things. So it's very straightforward to say that a chiller is an asset, a production line is an asset, a large truck or large vehicle is an asset. Now, how do those break down? Well, that's a great question. A production line will often break down into cells or multiple assets that make up the larger production line asset. And that's totally okay. In Maximo, we can have an asset hierarchy, and those things can be treated individually or as a whole. Our work orders, our preventive maintenance can be written against the individuals or the whole. That works out totally fine. And eventually you'll break down into the components and the spare parts that build those assets. So that works out. When we are looking at larger things like boilers and chillers, and we start looking, and the word system comes in, this one gets a little bit trickier, because a lot of times what we mean when we say system is all of the multiple assets that maybe exist in the boiler room that make up that boiler system, and not really all of the pipes that are going out through the facility, but really it's everything in the boiler room. And yes, we could call that an asset, but where that starts to get a little murky is if I send a technician in to repair something, and a boiler room's a pretty darn big room, and he's looking for that asset, that could become a problem. So we want to make sure that whatever we're calling an asset from a Maximo perspective is physically defined well enough that it's easy for people to identify in order to perform work against them. Now, so how do we handle that when that asset is larger and there's actually multiple components to it? Well, again, this comes back to the idea that we can create an asset hierarchy. And so we could create that, boiler system as an asset. Now, we would probably do this using locations, but for this purpose, we could do it, create it as an asset, and then break it down into the components so that we could see what each component is. Now, why would we tackle that particular one as a location hierarchy, breaking down to the assets? Well, because there's generally enough physical space covered that it's not really easy to know where you're going to find things. And with location numbers, it makes that a lot easier. Now, another area of this in facilities that often happens is that boiler room. Is that an asset? Well, why would it be? Great question. What if that room is shielded and the shielding in that room costs $500,000 or $1 million, and you have to maintain it, or it has a life expectancy and you need to replace it? Are you capitalizing that? That location just became an asset. And so the room itself became an asset as well. And then on the other side, things that don't typically meet maintenance requirements or don't even meet financial capitalized asset requirements end up becoming assets because of control. So when we are looking at our calibration standards or our calibration measurement equipment, because it has to be calibrated and that has to be tracked, the precision required drives us to calling it asset. Well, if I were a security firm and I have to track handguns and ammunition, both the handgun is definitely an asset, and there's an argument for that ammunition being an asset as well. So we have to think of the full context of not only what does it look like, but how is it used, what type of control do we need over it, and how are we capitalizing it or maintaining it. So we've seen property managers or property owners capitalize their renovations, and so they're effectively turning that office or that auditorium into an asset because of the amount of money they're putting into that one specific location. That room is now a capitalized asset. So a lot of things to think about there when it comes to what is an asset. Key thing to remember is that you always have locations available as a breakdown before you get to your assets. Within the assets, you also have the capability of an asset hierarchy before you get into your spare parts. Still wondering? Reach out. No question's a bad question. Hit us up. Happy to talk through it with you. We can figure it out together. Like, subscribe, get ready with Banetti.